Hi, I'm Henry Motte-Muñoz from Edukasyon.ph. Thank you so much for joining our webinar recently, and just wanted to share a couple of the highlights that we saw from the many presentations. I think it's really around 3 points. One is the underlying macro of the education space in the Philippines. The second one is around the impact of COVID, and the third one is on how to build user-centric solutions. I think whilst we are in very challenging times, it's important to remember that the core macro picture in the Philippines in some ways has not changed. The demographics still have a lot of potential in terms of we have a very young population. Culturally, education remains an incredibly important aspect of people's lives, irrespective of their socioeconomic group. And the desire to spend on education and to form the youth is very much there. Likewise, the trends of improving internet connectivity, improving investment in education by both the public and the private sector is continuing. And so we think that from a macro perspective, the long-term trends that have benefited education outcomes in the Philippines will be continuing beyond this pandemic. The second point is around COVID being a great accelerator. Now, there's been a massive negative economic impact. There's been a lot of health, obviously, negative impacts that COVID has had. But one of the silver linings is that it has forced learners, students, parents, institutions to reckon with the role that digital can play in their education at a much faster pace than we've ever seen in the country's history. And I think coupled with the rising internet penetration in the last couple of years, you're seeing this manifest itself in terms of number of schools that are taking up LMSs, a number of students that are suddenly taking up online education. They don't have a choice. And especially with the Philippines' handling of COVID, we will likely be under more lockdowns than the typical Southeast Asian nation. And so we think that COVID will actually accelerate a lot of the dynamics that we've seen in the last couple of years in terms of greater digitization for both the students, but also for the schools in terms of not just on the content and the teaching side, but even in terms of how they use software to run their companies. And then finally, I think, when it comes to creating a student-centric user journey, I think there's really 4 key takeaways. One is that at the core foundation, we have to build market and customer knowledge by gathering data. Without data, any of us are flying blind. The second one is once we have that data, we have to organize it and map it out to really understand what is the customer journey. And I think what's interesting is with COVID, I think people are thinking even more in terms of user journey as opposed to just, oh, this is the learner and this is what they have to pick up. And then I think once you've mapped that journey, you can identify the gaps in terms and then figure out how to simplify the journey, how to optimize it, and what to prioritize. So gather the data, map it out, and then test. And with that, we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you so much.